I'd like to welcome everyone to our October 13th Board of Education meeting. I'd like to apologize for being a half an hour late, but our executive session ran just a few minutes over. At this time, I'd like for us to have a moment of silence. It'll be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by our student board member. So if you would stand and for a moment of silence, please, followed by the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
First thing is to adopt the agenda. The agenda will be changed a little. Under new business, we're going to add the letter D, which will be a letter to Governor Hogan concerning attendance at extracurricular activities. So it will be a part of our agenda today. With that addition, do I hear a motion to accept the agenda? Motion to approve the agenda. So moved by Matthew. Second?
Second.
Seconded by Monica. Discussion? All those in favor of the amended agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And it is a 4-0 vote for the agenda. Approval of the consent agenda is the next item. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
So moved by Rodney. Is there a second? Seconded by Matthew. Discussion? All those in favor of the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And it's a 4-0 vote as well. You turn your attention to the September 15 public session minutes. I know each of you have read those already, but if there are any concerns or questions that you want to bring up about those minutes. Yes, Charlotte.
Okay, I have 1C, the last sentence in 1C. Okay, it says that, up in the first paragraph, the meeting was conducted via video conference due. We weren't on video conference, were we? This was the first executive session we had opened, I believe.
That was looking back at the August one, wasn't it?
August we were open.
Yeah, but we were on, we were in here, video.
Is that up in the top then?
Well, but it's, the handout Ms. Siebel's referencing to, it says to the September 15th.
Oh.
Yeah.
So I believe we are talking about this meeting, correct? I mean, not meeting, September.
It's the executive session for the September 15th meeting.
Yeah, you're correct.
That one you are.
Okay.
I was looking at the minute part below that.
I think you're correct.
1C.
Yeah,
We were all together.
Okay.
No one was on the video.
So that last sentence
Last
in the
sentence
first paragraph,
Could be taken.
right. And then 2E. 2E should be Southern Middle School instead of Southern High School up in the top when the request was made, that Southern Middle School counselor position.
You're correct.
Under the approval of the consent agenda, the, just lists the wrong school.
Yes. Should middle instead of high. It's correct further down
Right.
as you go down.
It's just that one sentence.
Did you find it, Ryan?
It also needs to be done as well further down, right before F.
Yep, I got it.
It says Southern High School again. Paragraph right before F. Should say Southern Middle.
But it's right in the box.
Yes, correct in the box. That's correct, right above the
That's all I have.
A lot of those go through on that one.
Mm-hmm.
Any other corrections, typos? Okay. Those in favor of, or motion,
I'll make a motion to approve
accept
that
the
change.
minutes?
A second.
Motion by Matthew, seconded by Charlotte, to accept the, September 15th minutes. Those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And the minutes are approved. After you turn your attention to the September 29th minutes, that was the special meeting that we had specifically for the audit report. Were there any concerns about that one?
I had one. In the first paragraph, wasn't Mrs. Baker on the phone?
I was.
Okay. So we need to indicate that
Yeah.
first
Yeah,
paragraph.
she should be, I guess, taken out of where it is and put at the bottom that she was participating via phone conference. Any others? Okay, hearing none, is there a motion to accept the September 29th minutes? So moved by Micah, seconded by Matthew. Any other discussion? Those in favor of the motion to approve the September 29th minutes, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And the minutes are approved. When I have the closed session summaries and announcements by the superintendent.
All right, thank you. This is the closed session summary, public content. Ms. Barbara Baker, Superintendent, will read the summary for September 15th, 2020. They met an executive session on Tuesday, September 15th at 4:01 p.m. under Authority 3-305 of the General Provisions Article of the Annotated Code of Maryland to discuss the following items. Review of executive session minutes, personnel topics pursuant to 3-305P1, and administrative function topics. The meeting was conducted via video conference. I think we're taking that out for that meeting, correct? Mrs. Rinker made a motion to close the meeting. Rodney Glatfeldy seconded the motion. Thereafter, the board unanimously voted to close the session with a yea vote from Rodney Glatfeldy, Monica Rinker, Matthew Paw, and Charlotte Seabold. The topics discussed in closed session included the following. August 11, 2020, executive session minutes. The board discussed revisions to the minutes. Monica Rinker made a motion to accept the amended minutes, and Rodney Glatfeldy seconded the motion. Final resolution, motion carries. Yea votes for Monica Rinker, Rodney Glatfeldy, Charlotte Seabold, and Matthew Paw. Personnel, certificated staffing recommendations. Dr. Jane Wilderson, Director of Human Resources and Employee Relations, presented certificated staffing recommendations to the board. The board discussed the recommendations and voted on this matter in public session. Dr. Wilderson provided the board with a list of non-certificated staffing that was recently hired. These updates were informational items, and the board did not take action on this matter. Superintendent Evaluation, the board discussed the scheduling of the Superintendent Evaluation meeting. Administrative functions, the board discussed various administrative function topics. The board considered these topics but did not take any action on these items. Recess. Matthew Paw made a motion to adjourn the executive session, and Charlotte Seabold seconded the motion. The board adjourned the executive session at 6:19 p.m. Mr. Tom Woods, Board President, Mrs. Monica Rinker, Board Vice President, and Board members Mrs. Charlotte Seabold, Mr. Rodney Glatfeldy, Dr. Matthew Paw were in attendance. Also in attendance for part or all of the meeting were Mrs. Barbara Baker, Superintendent, Mr. Brandon Hoover, Board Attorney, Mrs. Karen DeVore, Executive Director of Curriculum Instruction Administration, Dr. Jane Wilderson, Director of Human Resources, and Mrs. Karen Brewer, Executive Assistant to the Superintendent. All right, so for announcements, yesterday, October 12th, grades 2, 3, 6, 9, and 12 returned to in-person instruction in the hybrid model. Starting October 14th and 15th is the May virtual annual conference. I think there might be a couple of things tomorrow. November 3rd is Election Day. Schools will be closed that day. November 10th is our next board meeting. And I wanted to, make an announcement that November 6th, which is a Friday night, that will be our first, game at Northern High School on the new turf, field. We plan to have a celebration. We're going to ask Senator Edwards and Delegate Beitzel to come. We're going to invite you all board members to come. And traditionally, the Northern Southern game has always been the last game of the season where we've celebrated the last few years with Garrett County Public Schools Spirit Day. So we really, really, really want to have some Garrett County spirit that day and really publicize that this year. And as we're bringing our kids back and getting back into school, I think it's a great time to celebrate all the things that are going really well for our school system, and hope that we'll come out and celebrate and visit the new field at Northern High School that night. And time to be determined. Did you think it's 6 o'clock?
I thought I read someplace it was 6 o'clock, yeah.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next piece of the agenda is to recognize National School Bus Safety Week. And we'll do that.
No public comment, correct?
Oh, I'm sorry, there was no, thank you, Monica. There was no public comment given to us this month. I'll just sit here and read it, and we have our Director of Transportation, Mr. Wozlowski, here with us, and present that to him as soon as I read the proclamation. Whereas children are our nation's most precious resource, representing our nation's future and protecting their needs to be the highest priority. Whereas America's school buses comprise the largest mass transportation fleet in the country, being 2.5 times the size of all other forms of mass transportation combined. And whereas school buses meet higher construction specifications and inspection standards than any other vehicle. And whereas school bus drivers meet higher qualification, training, and testing standards than any other drivers. And whereas National School Bus Safety Week, which dates back to 1966, recognizes the hard work and dedication of school transportation personnel, especially the many school bus drivers who ensure a safe journey each and every day. And whereas the thousands of pupil transportation professionals throughout every state work continuously to promote the safety of our nation's school-age children and to improve upon an already stellar safety record through national conferences, driving and poster competition, and local media promotions emphasizing the importance of school bus safety both on and off the school bus. Now, therefore, we, the Garrett County Board of Education, do hereby proclaim the third full week of October as National School Bus Safety Week and encourage all citizens to recognize the hard work and dedication of pupil transportation professionals, the excellent safety record of school bus drivers, the benefits of school bus driver training, the importance of students obeying safety rules at all times, and the need for heightened vigilance on the part of vehicle drivers when in the vicinity of school buses. Certainly I would add to that proclamation that Mr. Wozlowski, his staff, and all the bus drivers, assistants, everyone who has something to do with our transportation department and school system is in a situation that no one could have ever predicted, nor could have any knowledge as to where to proceed. But we have a great faith that we're doing everything as safe as we possibly can. I know Mr. Wozlowski has implemented a tremendous amount of rules protecting students. So thank you, Rich, for all that you do and all everybody in your staff does. And I'd like you to say a couple words too on behalf of your staff.
I commend the contractors and drivers. Challenging times, on top of everything. Certain kids on Monday, Tuesday, other kids Thursday, Friday, and then some kids all 4 days. So juggling the route and trying to keep all that straight has been a big challenge. The mask, the extra cleaning, and all this kind of thing. So
Yeah.
it's good. It's going very smooth at this point, and this public like to commend them and everything that they're doing for us.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yes, I think so. Yeah. Get first picture, yeah.
Yeah, let's, want to go right back there? Yeah.
Five. Try not to drink.
Yeah.
Pictures to send in your face for the public. I'm glad you don't have yours on, because I don't.
Sure. Come on over here. Right.
Thank you, congratulations. Please pass along our thanks as well. She's a very good student. Oh.
Now, we'd like to also recognize Food and Nutrition Services Department, and I think we're gonna play a little clip of a, thing that we did yesterday?
Yesterday?
Yeah, I guess it was yesterday, wasn't it? To honor those folks.
We'd like to honor each of you and all of you for everything you've been doing all summer long. It's been incredible. All of us are so thankful, as I'm sure hundreds, if not thousands of families are thankful for all the work that you've done. It's been incredible, so thank you very much. But we do want to honor you with a proclamation and certificate, each of you, for all the things that you have done far beyond what could be asked of perhaps anybody. We'd like to give you $2,000 bonuses, but unfortunately, we can't find that in our budget. Honoring the work of Food and Nutrition Services Staff proclamation. Whereas the staff of Food and Nutrition Services has served over 421,401 meals since March of 2020. And whereas every Monday through Friday, FNS offers meals to 13 school buildings. And whereas 7 days of breakfast and lunch are also served at 16 sites. 7 days of dinners and snacks are available at 16 sites. And whereas FNS staff assisted with school-based work, distributing laptops, books, planning collaboratively with school administrators in anticipation of each phase of our in-person instruction. Now, therefore, let it be resolved, the Garrett County Board of Education expresses tremendous appreciation for all staff of Food and Nutrition Services for the diligent efforts to ensure that all children in the GCPS community are always fed and ready to learn. Dated this 12th day of October 2020. Thank you.
Scott, and thank them each. And, you know, when you think about delivering 421,000 meals, that's a school system this size, that's just an incredible feat. So
Yeah.
I don't think we can say enough thank yous to that department for everything that they've done.
I totally agree, and I think it's a testament to Mr. Germain. He wanted the award to really, as Mr. Wazlowski gave all the credit to his drivers and his contractors, Scott really wanted the accolades to go to the staff who have been the frontline folks. And knew that we wouldn't all be able to have them all here, and I thought it was a great idea that we did it at Dennett Road yesterday. So thank you for coming out, I appreciate it. It meant a lot to them.
Yeah,
The video is on Board Docs, we wanted to mention that as well, right?
yes,
Somebody wanted to watch the whole thing.
yes, if you want to watch watch all the certificates being given.
Yep.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Next, we'll move down to new business, comprehensive maintenance plan, educational facility.
This will be a first read for the 2020 version of the comprehensive maintenance plan for educational facilities for Garrett County Public Schools. As I went through any changes, I marked in red for the group. I won't name names, but you can see on we have some more organizational changes with the retirements and staff leaving. This is kind of how the makeups in the interim are going to work on our side as we go forward. I added some new language and certain things. I do want to point out that the number I use for is the replacement value I got off the annual report from MSDE. $280,251,000 comes as a replacement value. I believe the previous figure was actually from our insurance company, and they would just add 3% to that. We can come back to that. We can have a discussion to go with either or on that one with regard to that number on page 3. And then it also appears on page 4. Added some additional language, as you see there in red. And then the standard forms are behind in terms of preventative maintenance that the state wants to see. Remember, all these preventative maintenance things are put into a ticket into the work order system that's produced for and then distributed to the appropriate maintenance person based on the schedule, whether it's annual, biannual, and those things. So it's not just on this paper, it's actually put into the system. We are required to report some of this data to the state as we complete things. And then each one of the things, I added something in yellow to just make things appear on the CIP as was adopted by the board, just to kind of indicate where they kind of lie within the comprehensive maintenance plan as we go forward. I will admit that the floor, tile, and carpet is a little lacking. We haven't really, we got to look more at that. And, but that's kind of the update you'll see in red there throughout the plan.
Yeah, the yellow in CIP was very nice.
Yeah, that really made it very easy to find those.
Yeah. But, just a short synopsis, any questions at this point? Being a first read, I can address those and correct them as needed.
On your, on your flow chart, your operations, maintenance, organizational chart, should both your managers be interim?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I thought that was already a.
Yeah. I guess the person's interim, not the position, because the position's there, but yeah, I just have people doing, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
That makes sense.
I mean,
The way you're.
Yeah, they're just filling in until we.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought that was already his position.
No.
Okay.
No.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I have a couple questions.
Yeah,
I want,
sure.
same thing she just said, I looked at our organizational chart.
Yeah.
It didn't have that interim.
Yeah.
That's just because,
I'll move interim down next to the name. Is that?
yeah, that makes, yeah.
Okay, yep.
It almost like because we've always had those jobs.
Okay. Yep. We can do that.
Those have been on the organizational chart.
Yep. I'll just move it down next to the
I
name.
thought that word, okay.
Yep. And,
That makes it a little
Yeah. Okay.
confusing.
Makes sense.
I have a couple questions.
Go ahead.
When you look at page 5,
Okay.
because I mean, this is all new that you put on here.
Yep.
Building use. When you go down, I think it's in the middle sentence, this is true, especially true in some of the school buildings in Garrett County that have extensive community use patterns. Okay. My question is, what do you mean extensive community use patterns? Is that like this gym being used for practice?
Correct. It'd be gyms, it would be cafeterias, it would be anywhere. We do a lot of robotics in the northern and in some areas, so it's just natural as more people utilize those spaces. I mean, carpet wears out faster or whatever it might be. So just really looking at building use. You can see where we.
If I could follow up on your question for a second. I think one of the things probably that you'll need to maybe bring to the board at the next board meeting is a position that the system is going to take on use of our indoor facilities by outside groups. Those are gonna start to be.
During the pandemic,
Pardon me?
during the pandemic?
Yes,
Okay.
during the pandemic.
Okay.
So,
Which will be a position that obviously the school system will have to take as to whether or not outside groups will have access to any of our indoor facilities.
talking about community groups, mat clubs, all those kind of things, and we're, okay.
Anything outside the school system.
All right.
The sentence said vandalism after that one that she just read. Vandalism during occupied and unoccupied hours also places an additional cost burden on the school maintenance program. Is that a problem?
No, it's not a problem, but it will occur at times, whether a kid might, more people in the building, they might write on the wall, or they might just because there's more people, there's more prone to do something like that. But we do not have a systemic problem with vandalism.
Okay, I didn't think we did.
No, we get very few things in terms of vandalism.
Okay, on that same levels of maintenance and related cost factors, number 4, your advances in technology. Down toward the bottom, it says, while such advances may show a first-time or one-time increase in the maintenance or construction budget.
Mm-hmm.
That would be, for example, not too long ago it was passed for the utility savings. I forget what it was called. Is that would that be like an example of that?
I think an example is sometimes we buy systems that would create efficiencies,
Okay.
but then there might be a licensing fee that comes along with that we have to then, carry throughout the budget years. So even though companies present things, hey, we can save you all these kind of things, and we should be always looking to advance technology, especially in terms of efficiency in that. We just have to understand that there could be a reoccurring cost to the school system for those kind of things.
So like, this is new technology, that might be our Schoology.
Well, yeah.
Well, but you know what I mean, like,
Exactly.
I'm just thinking that's something that's new and.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I ask a question just for information? I know when we went on the school tours that, talking about the lighting, we went into, a deal and got different lighting. It seemed very bright and harsh. Has that been a problem or,
We did get comments about the classrooms with some of the light. The majority of the classrooms that we did do have the double light switch, but we have since then, in moving forward, have lowered the luminance of the ones in the classroom.
okay,
They went from a 4,000 to a 3,200 to kind of counter that a little bit.
okay.
So that was brought to our attention, and we did counter with making a small change in that.
Oh,
to lower
okay.
a little bit.
Okay, good. I
Yeah.
noticed that, it's nice to have a lot of light, but you can
Yeah. Yeah.
overdo.
Yeah, and then we've also, as part of the project, in some of the gyms, we were able to get through the company a shield. There was a little concern about the brightness, not the brightness, but when, I guess you look up at a volleyball, you kind of get that. So we got these shades to kind of put them around to kind of take care of that. So we've been countering some of the feedback we've been getting as we've put them into schools.
Okay, okay, good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Page 9, under maintenance vehicle replacement schedule. The new 2020 F-350 Carpenter truck, did that replace one of them up there, the one in 2007?
Yeah, that was placed, 07, yeah.
Okay.
And, that's being used to serve food right now.
The pickup truck?
The new one?
The old one.
The old one?
Yeah, that's coming one of the trailers around. So we'll move that on to once we're done with that one. Yes, but that was replaced. That should be in red on that page there. The bottom, I think it is on page, the Ford F-350. The one ton. Yeah. And then you can see we did not purchase a vehicle in 21, so I just moved that out a year. We had the IT van on there, but we decided through the budget to just
Oh, yeah.
to hold out a year on that.
2020.
Okay.
Probably a good idea.
When you can talk now.
Just on page 10, a number of pickups and vans that's going to auction. Just out of curiosity, how do you auction those off? Do you do it internally or do you send them to an auction house?
Yeah, we do it internally over at the old maintenance shop. The company's escaping me now who we use, but they come in, we just kind of like put everything out in the yard and the buildings, and then it's advertised, and they come in, Allison's in the room, 20,000, I can't remember, if it's 20,000 a year, or roughly we make auctioning everything.
So when's the next auction?
We would do it, buy-in it'll be next year. We don't have enough in a year, so we try to do it every other year.
So you're just holding these ones that are going to auction,
Yeah.
trying to use them if you can?
Yeah, anything, yeah. I believe all the ones at the top are gone.
That was done last.
Yeah, that was done in the last one. Yep.
When I look at page 13, a roof restoration replacement schedule, you got it, it says TR total replacement. So the next one we have total replacement is, for Grantsville. So I guess Broadford, we'll just patch it as we need it because it's not on there.
Yeah.
And I know that we
Mhm.
sent something over,
Yep.
in our CIP, but
That's what's scheduled on the,
right. But I know in the past, we've had Broadford on there as a total replacement, so I just gotta keep asking, but,
and hopefully when, as we move forward with the CIP, we're gonna have some answers, in the next, hopefully year and a half, to where direction we're heading in terms of what's gonna happen with Broadford. So we'll keep it going until then.
About 40, that's in repair.
We're monitoring the patching that we're doing. It seems to be okay right now. They would have us through the winter season, but I'm hoping that kind of comes through for us.
page 15, bleacher repair replacement schedule. Now I see you've added new Southern Middle School, and those are the ones that were donated to us from the college, correct? So that's why you have them starting in 21 for their,
Yeah,
maintenance.
we started maintenance on them this year.
Okay, my next question, the new, the turf field. So when you look at Northern High, it still just says football home, football visitor, indoor home, indoor visitor. But at Southern, you have football home, new field, football visitor, new field. So that means there'll be one bleacher on the old field, correct? And then,
What I mean is at Northern, it'd be more of a partial, because I think we can possibly salvage a little bit of that. But at Southern, I put a T because there is none. It's a total replacement at the Southern visitors. I'm saying new field is the way to say that. But
and on the bottom of that, can we have, where you put on there, the year and put turf field, and I think it'd be good, we need a little bit of an explanation, I mean, well,
I can have something on.
because,
Grass field and turf field.
well, but before that, I guess we should put Southern Middle School,
Grass field, turf field. That's a good way to put it.
right? Put on there about Southern Middle School bleachers, something, you know what I mean? We've got everything else on there. I think we need a,
I can put a little blurb that they were donated from Garrett College. Is that sufficient?
yeah.
For the new bleachers at the middle school, okay.
So I guess you'll do what was just said then, for, even if they're football home for Northern, it'll be, turf, right? And then Southern, you'll have grass on the one and turf on the other two, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Anything else?
main questions I had.
Perfect. Okay. Any other questions? This is the first read, so we have more questions. We go on to the action.
I guess on the sheet that you will adjust, that, writing on the bleachers, it can be sent to us and it has.
Right, I was gonna, if we do have questions,
When it is final, we can,
have those in advance and we can ask the things that we need to.
That was kind of part of when we discussed it, I believe, was it last night or today, to review, so that made it,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Not a problem.
Next is our quarterly finance report for the, FY 21 quarter one, and I'll ask, Schweitzer to lead us through that.
Good evening. We were just here a couple weeks ago to talk about, the fiscal 2020 results. And it's already the end of the first quarter of FY 21. So, honestly, there's not a whole lot of, variance to, expected budget. In this first quarter, the biggest, difference that we experienced is that in FY 21, there were 6 pay periods in the first quarter, and in FY 20, there were only 5. So almost all of the instances where we are running ahead of last year is because of that additional pay period. There are a couple categories that we are running a little bit behind: instructional supplies and instructional other. And that is really due wholly to the situation of the pandemic and our recovery plan that we're working. There is an awful lot of CARES Act, federal CARES Act funding that we're using first before we get to the unrestricted general fund dollars that we're spending. Also, pupil transportation is a little bit behind. That's because in September, we paid the contract minimum as students were not being transported until September 14th. So those payments are hitting in October. So that was a timing difference. And then you'll also see that with respect to capital outlay, we are behind on capital outlay when you compare it to last year. However, our school construction is by far, it is over $2 million ahead of the last first quarter of last year, because the effort is really in our school construction project rather than our capital outlay project at this point in time. So, are there any questions?
I have a little inquiry here just for information. Food nutrition services transfer, we budgeted $348,000. We've spent less than 1% of that. To what do you accredit, that not spending that much thus far?
So the food service transfer that you see on the general fund, which is the unrestricted reflection, is only the fixed charges. So all of the salaried food service employees are paid through the summer. So their benefits for their new contract don't begin until the beginning of September. So this is, this is pretty typical of the food service transfer. So.
Thank you.
that would have been the same last year though, right?
Well, one thing that is different is that there are fewer food service employees. So there are fewer that are working on the food service fund. I didn't realize we have less employees working in food service right now.
I didn't either.
Is that what you just said, right, Ms. White? Yes. Yes, they've been reallocated as cleaners and screeners. They're,
Okay.
Right.
the learning center, so they're not coded to food service right now because they're working for the general.
Okay, so we don't have less employees, they're still an employee, but they're getting paid through a different category. Because it sounded like
Right.
we had less amount of employees. But
I'm sorry that I misrepresented that, but we have less food service workers.
Right, I guess.
Because they're doing other things.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well,
Thank you.
thank you, Allison, for the update. Appreciate it. Very much. You're gonna stay there, I think, and we're gonna talk about enrollment and revenue estimates.
Okay, so this presentation is the earliest that, Mrs. Baker or myself have ever, come to the board with projections or estimates. Enrollment estimates, or enrollment, counts are not due to MSDE until November 20th. So we, at GCPS, do take the entire month of October reconciling, the whereabouts of all the students. So this is a very early indication of what we're estimating our enrollment is going to look like. So the first slide is a line graph that is showing a 10-year average of our of the school system kindergarten through 12th grade enrollment. So you'll see that we've had a couple year-over-year periods in which we have hit that 130 plus dip in enrollment. From 2010 to 2011, we lost 141 students. 2012 to 2013 was 132 and a half. And then right now we're estimating our year-over-year loss from 2019 to 2020 to be around 135 students.
It's an early estimate, but is it worst case or best case scenario?
This is best case.
This is best case. Okay. That's unfortunate.
So on this slide, we wanted to show the board what the enrollment looked like during last school year. Last school year was unlike any other school year, in which March 13th was our last day of in-person instruction. So you'll see that from the September count, which was 3627.25, to the end of June, we were down 57 students. So before the coronavirus pandemic even hit, we had sustained decline in enrollment. Now, we had anticipated this through discussions with the county economic development professionals. We did anticipate that we would see a decline because it's the second full year of the Verso mills being closed. And we had been advised that that is when you see families that must leave the area to find other employment. So we weren't alarmed because we knew that this was likely something that could happen. So the other point, the other piece that this does not show is the variance between the exiting seniors and the incoming kindergartners. Okay. So on this, on these charts, what Mrs. Baker and I are attempting to provide for the board is a idea of where the students either went or where they came from with respect to Garrett County Public Schools. So the exits are by far and away, a majority are leaving for other public schools. Then the second reason is parent home instruction. And then we do have the non-public, which non-public is, that's the blue one. That is, if they went to, Bishop Walsh, or they chose a different alternative that was not a public school. And then we do have other. Other is when they drop out, they decide not to continue. Mostly it's high school that we see the other group. The enrollments are also far away. The most of the students that are entering Garrett County Public Schools are coming from another public school. So they may be coming from another school in the U.S., or they may be coming from another school in the state of Maryland. The next highest is parent home instruction, and we did have 15.3% of our enrollments were students that were coming from parent home instruction, whether they were new to the area or they had been in our area before, but they had decided that Garrett County Public Schools was a good option for their family. Then the last chart, the total change, this is an attempt to provide the board with the net change. So by category, when you take the enrollment less the exits, this is the percentage that you're left with. So the parent home instruction exits are higher than the parent home instruction enrollments. And then the next is the public school, and then the other and the non-public are negligible. So again, this chart does not take into account the variance between the exiting seniors and the incoming kindergartners, which that variance is what you're seeing when you see the year over year, the 3627 down to the number that we have today. So there are a lot of things that go into the year over year change. It's not just one thing or one reason, but what we're seeing here is not unique to Garrett County Public Schools. On Tuesdays, we have the CFOs for all the school systems in the state. We have a standing 1 o'clock conference call, and this is something that we've all worked together to prepare leading indicator data for the Department of Legislative Services, because it is a state issue, and it's actually a national issue. I participated in a school district government financial officer roundtable today, and the panelists were from Florida and Chicago and Texas and California, and they were all having enrollment decline issues. Lucky for us, the percentage changes that they were discussing were much higher than what we're looking at. So it's not just here, and we are all aware and trying to educate ourselves. So now we shift over to the revenue projections. So when we start to talk about state aid and local aid, the variables that go into the funding formulas are very fixed, and they're a part of legislative action. So unfortunately, the governor can't just make an executive order for a waiver for the way that these formulas are calculated. Legislative action would be required. So that's why it's important that the CFOs are working with the Department of Legislative Services, so that at the beginning of the legislative session in January, they have information much earlier than they would have had it in prior years. Because the enrollment data isn't due until November 20th. That means it doesn't roll up until after Thanksgiving. Everything is about a holiday then, because they do that after Thanksgiving, and then they proof the numbers right before Christmas, and then the governor's budget comes out usually the second week of January. So one thing that may be a little different this year from other years is that normally Garrett County Public School enrollment is either declining or flat, while the state is increasing at a pretty good rate. So that inverted ratio is not favorable for us. We're all looking at everybody's decline or stabilization. So there is a chance that the trend, we're in line with the trend. One of the other big factors that we've talked about a lot is the wealth. We don't see that going away. And, you know, it's probably still going to be a challenge for Garrett County. And then it's the inflationary indexes at the turn of the fiscal year were strong. Inflation is still occurring. So that's also in our favor, because if they apply the inflationary indexes to the formulas, then we do receive more dollars, even if we have fewer students. And when you go to the local funding variable, it's really only the K through 12 enrollment, and then the educational effort, usually the net November taxable income. And so that is the escalator that we've discussed. And last year, our local government was forced, as was about half of the local governments in the state of Maryland, to increase their per pupil maintenance of effort allocation by the mandatory 2.5% increase. So what I prepared here for the board were 3 possible scenarios or projections. So Model A is what I usually do for Mrs. Baker. It's usually what I do right after the audit's finished, and I share it with her based off of estimated enrollment numbers that we have. This assumes that the county's enrollment is either flat or declining. This year it's declining, and the state is increasing. So what we're looking at here, the year-over-year state variance is $712,685, and that is if the state does the state enrollment increases. You'll see that the local year-over-year doesn't change with any of these models, because I didn't assume at any of these levels that the county would have the escalator enacted. So then with Model B, I assumed that the state and the county declined at the exact same rate. So we still would receive less funding from the state year over year. And that's in large part due to the sunsetting of the blueprint funding that has awarded us the teacher salary incentive grant, the mental health coordinator, and a couple other pieces of funding. Then Model C is a very hopeful model that Governor Hogan will enact the hold harmless for the state funding. Governor Hogan has, in all of the years that he has been preparing the budget, included hold harmless for education, and it is not required. It's not required at all that he does that. So Model C is a very hopeful model that something will happen, whether hold harmless covers all of the variance or there's some sort of legislation that comes into play that helps. But that would be have a zero variance from the state. Unfortunately, there are not a lot of scenarios that can be played with when it comes to local funding other than the escalator. So, we are looking at being, over $1 million down year over year.
How would the override of the veto of the blueprint, affect the funding? Are you're not assuming that override's gonna occur, or you are?
I'm not assuming that because I don't know what is happening to the legislation to change the formulas that were in the bill to begin with. And we're not getting any information about that right now in our CFO meetings.
Well,
So I wasn't assuming that we would get any of that.
Well, the legislative committee meeting a couple weeks ago, we talked about this and what's the easiest way to get an increase, and I was saying, well, wouldn't it be the easiest way to just escalate the per pupil allocation? They, and Maeve's, perspective on it, well, our big effort's gonna get the blueprint, overridden, the veto overridden, because that's how we're going to increase per student, allocations. So, I don't know, it's a balancing act, whether there's an override, or whether they talk to the governor about doing some type of a hold harmless clause, and, I don't know which way it's gonna, sort out either right now.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why the Department of Legislative Services wanted the enrollment data as early as possible, so that they could kind of model a couple of different options for the legislature, so that they can see what helps most Marylanders, maybe not like the big four or just rural, so we're hopeful that something will be happening with Blueprint. We have heard that, the school construction legislation is set to be the first one back in and Governor Hogan, is an advocate of it because the school construction is such an economic driver. That's the thing, that's the one that we have talked about, but, I don't know about, we haven't heard any, grumblings or anything about the print, so you probably have more information than I do.
Up in here, I think, their effort's gonna be in trying to get the override of the veto, so I don't know how this affects all the other things that are going on, but,
Right.
I need something. And the, Build to Learn Act is, won't take into effect unless
Right,
the blueprint goes into effect, so
unless they change the language.
they could change the language.
Just out of interest, you mentioned two other dates in which we lost more students than we were forecasting we would lose this year. Probably asking a question that perhaps you don't know, perhaps you do. What was the reason for that? What happened during those 2 years that those were very large numbers? Because you don't take out the seniors versus the incoming. So they constant throughout the model. I just wonder why those 2 years were unique.
Right, and I don't have an answer for you
Got it.
for that.
Something
Well, we were in the middle of a, major recession in 2010, 2011, so it's possible people lost their jobs in their county and had to move somewhere else. That's,
you got versus
Especially
you
if
could.
you allow 2 years.
Yeah, but that's probably a very good, reason.
another question, Allison. I saw some charts about the losses in all the counties in Maryland. I think you've seen that too. And, some of the counties didn't lose that many. I mean, Somerset's one, I forget, there was 2 or 3 other counties. Are you talking to, the CFOs in those counties to find out how they maintain their enrollment?
Well,
I don't know.
There, yeah, so, there was one, the one that you're, referencing had reported some information, not understanding what,
Okay.
so,
I was wondering.
It was restated, and so,
now there were, because last Friday there were like 3 counties that were showing increases year over year, and so when they were asked, their data wasn't comparable to what everybody else was reporting, so.
A lot of our reports after that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Multi model of dollars.
Well, and the thing was, like, I just put in the new, numbers that everyone shared confidentially, and I put it into my spreadsheet, and we are not at all the biggest loser. So,
Sure, the big counties are.
yeah.
they are. And you know, we had a concerted effort on the parents that were considering homeschooling. The principals really reached out. You talked to a couple of principals in our tours. They really reached out to those families to talk about what their needs were, and, you know, we can't ask them why they are leaving, but we can certainly ask them if there are things we can do to have them stay with the school system, and I think we did get a number of families that did stay with us, and I think we will get additional families that will come back. That wasn't certainly the only thing that made up the loss, but, you know, we do need to do a shout out to our principals who really took that, to heart and really did a nice job reaching out to families.
Okay, any further questions about, this?
So looking at what you showed us, when you explained about, which it was interesting for the beginning of the year, the months, like the change variable in the number of students enrolled. So actually, I mean, the one chart shows about 135 students were down, but you could actually say about 60 of them approximately was the beginning of more than the year, and it could be really affiliated to the shutdown of the Verso Mill. So then we kind of could say, speculation, that about 74 is what we've lost since like July or August possibly, maybe.
Well,
The number.
about 20 is the variance between the exiting seniors and the incoming kindergartners.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to take into account those too. So.
Thanks.
Okay. No further questions? Thank you.
That's all.
That information to us. Obviously, someone to monitor very, very closely. Okay, next on our agenda is the new item that we added before we adopted this agenda. The letter to Governor Hogan concerning attendance at extracurricular activities. We did ask the superintendent to work with the Director of Secondary Education and Athletics to formulate a request to the governor's office to allow us to have a little more flexibility with who might be able to attend outdoor and indoor events. Just to kind of give a little bit of a precursor to that discussion. At the moment, we're only about 250 people, including players, officials, clock operators, ticket takers, anything that has to do with the person on the ground. And what's left over is deemed spectators. So if you took 250 men's football teams, coaches, all the other people, you know, you're talking close to 175 people probably. So you have less than 100 spectators to be some way distributed between two teams. So it's a dilemma that we face, not only us, but everybody in the state faces. So the superintendent will explain to you the letter that we're sending to Governor Hogan asking for some relief in those number of capacities.
Okay, yeah, so we, and Mr. Woods is correct that Mr. Edwards and I, he did the, majority of the letter. And our position, as Mr. Woods stated, you know, by the time you take out all of the players and the coaches would not likely be interacting with the spectators in too many capacities. So, the letter basically asked Governor Hogan, the Maryland professional sports, that's our argument, that the Maryland professional sports does allow a difference between the players, coaches, officials, and the spectators. Spectators are the number that he's decided. So we've asked the letter, if the board approves it, asked the governor to reconsider, if possible, that the spectators would be counted as one, and then reasonable numbers of players and coaches would be separate from that. It's just, we don't know the consideration of the governor of everything that he has right now. But certainly I don't think it hurts to ask if the board is in favor of sending the letter to Governor Hogan.
Okay, so this is an action item, so I'll take recommendation, and we'll see if they have a motion in a second. The recommendation is?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Your
So my
recommendation
my recommendation is to send the letter as I'm sorry.
Want to get that in our notes?
I make a motion to approve.
Motion by Matthew to approve the letter, second? Seconded by Charlotte. Discussion now concerning the letter that we're going to send to the governor. Discussion items, anybody?
Well, it was $250 for outside and $100 for
Yeah,
inside.
it is different.
Yeah, it is different.
And we're not requesting a change to this.
Right.
Numbers will keep the same.
Right.
Just wanna,
Right, we just want to deduct the people that are on the floor mostly and
just put-
away from, right.
Yeah, and it's 100.
And there's still the other part based on the capacity of the room that
It's lesser, it could be less,
50% of occupancy.
50% or those numbers or less, whichever's less.
Right.
Yeah, it presents an even greater, presents a very difficult problem with indoors. When you consider a basketball, a gymnasium, filled with 800 people who want to come to a basketball game. Only about 50 of them can come. So, we're hoping we can get some help with that. Okay, that being said, there's a motion and a second to send a letter. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And thank you for that.
All right, thank you.
Our next bit of on the agenda, it has to do with policies and procedures, JCB admission to school, out of attendance area, policy and procedures, revised for us to take a look at.
Good evening.
Thank you, Dr. Albert, for coming.
Okay, we have a policy and procedure on out-of areas. Some of that is just clarifications. In the policy, we clarified and revised the student needs and services and those examples of student needs that would require out of area. And looking at the IEP committee, which can recommend a change in schools to meet the needs. Also added for foster care and homeless students. And we added a section on the responsibilities for the out of area, the process for this request. Then in the procedures, we clarified the roles of assigning students to schools in the district, and that the Board of Education has that authority to set what school serves each distinct district. And we provided definitions for the different terms that we use in the procedures. We explained the procedure for applying for an out of area by the parent, and we now use a system called Workflow to process the out of areas. And it's computer based, so it goes to each of the people that need to review it through the computer. We have the reasons why a request would be denied, in the policy, the reasons for a request are outlined, and the procedures, we do indicate, the reasons or basis for a denial of the out of area. And then we've, so I've updated our form, application form, included that, with the procedures.
Yes, I'm sorry.
So, you know, we met with you, the personnel committee met, and one of the things I think we put in here, I'm glad to see, incorporated the quick turnaround from when the request is made, when the principal has to respond, from the home school and from the transfer school and then transportation department. So I think total, it's like a 9-day turnaround now, right? And then it goes to the services and they determine whether to.
I'd say often quicker than that.
And previously, the parent needed to take that form to each
of the principals, and then from there, became the central office, went to transportation, but now this is all computer-based, so the principals do contact the parent once they receive it, but that first principal that receives it then sends it into the central office where it's put into workflow. So that's, yeah, a very good system.
Yes, my question, we had this come to us a couple of years ago. We looked at it and determined, that it was working for us the way it was. What brought it back to us? Is there a change at the state level or what?
Well, adding, the, homeless and foster care is one change that, come about,
8 and 9.
with, foster care under the.
Yeah, there's the scope.
Okay, number 7, was to allow school choice if a school is closed.
And we're not in any situation where that would apply now.
Really?
So, well, I think if that is foreseen, then that issue probably needs to be discussed, and if we need to, we revise the policy and procedure at that point.
But also, we determined that if a school were to close, we would redistrict. I mean, in
We
the
may.
case that there was a school closure, it would be redistricted, so we would be we would have a reason for doing that. We wouldn't want to then allow school choice.
And be part of that whole process of, you know.
They can still go through the out of area if they were.
Exactly, but the rest of the out of area still applies.
Correct.
So there's nothing to keep, like, I think one of the reasons, and I think we'll find that if we don't have some flexibility in schools where kids go to school at, here, we're gonna lose some students because of the fact that, I believe some, people are, feel that they do have some flexibility here to move within the system. But I know we have a limit. We have a limit on how many, students, you know, where your level is supposed to be. We also have a district that doesn't really have a district like Swan Meadow. So what is this gonna do to their situation?
They have it.
Change it any more than it was before.
They have a district now.
We defined it,
We did, in
back
that,
in like 2014, 15.
we went ahead with that. My understanding was that we didn't.
We do have a district.
But kids don't live in the district, that live right by the school. Isn't that the situation?
Well, I think that has been brought up as a concern, but there are no houses there where that concern is.
Oh, I understood that there were kids living there.
Well, I mean, they could be, but they could certainly apply to go to Yacht Blaze. I don't believe we've taken any of that kind of flexibility out of this procedure.
We do have out of area students attending.
Yeah.
I think every school has
Okay.
out of area
Yeah, I
students.
think we saw those.
And so you're telling me, this is what I want to hear, that there's no changes made to this that would cause that to be a problem?
Right.
I don't think anything currently it would change. It clarifies, the process.
Good, Ron.
I believe maybe 2-3 years ago, we had a discussion with this, and we actually had requested, which I didn't bring with me, a sheet, and it explained, like, it named all the schools. You know, like, say, for example, these kids students should have went to Broadford, but instead some went to maybe Accident or Yuck Lane, and then it was very clear, and it actually equaled out pretty good. I mean, like, you might have had 5 kids that should have been going to your school in the district, but you might have had 5 or 6 coming in. So, I mean, I really think if we change as much, we really could lose, because I think some of them might have been staff. It makes it simpler. Your child, if you might live in one in a big
Well,
county.
yeah, usually that's a daycare.
Yeah, so there's a lot of factors play into this, but when we actually, it was researched and we had the information, it pretty much equaled out. Like,
Yeah, and that's why we didn't make any major changes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think, I think
Just a
it was.
procedure on how to do it.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
really was to incorporate a couple of changes and to ensure that the workflow, which really is outlined in the procedure on how, instead of having to physically take it
Yeah.
to each location, it now just goes electronically, and that will speed up the process. It'll actually be better, I think. It doesn't eliminate any of the flexibility, that it had. And again, it's the first read. We can certainly, you know, if you have questions, if you don't feel there's as much flexibility, but I don't think, content, we changed, anything in that regard.
And the only reasons, for requesting out of that area, and this didn't change the reason, but, clarifying and rewording if the child has a physical or health needs that can be better met, at another school. And again, the foster care and the homeless, having that right to request out of area if it's moved.
Just,
Dr. Lover, why do we specify ADHD? It says student.
Those are just given as examples of why, one child may be used.
Procedure policy, what's that?
That's in
See
the,
that
that was
in policy,
under
scope
one.
number 1.
It was in the original, I kept everything that was in the original as examples, just reworded them.
Yeah, that's right, it was there already.
But it wouldn't have to be specified.
There are many other disorders that could cause the same effect, I think you'd agree. I mean, ADHD is not the only one.
Correct. Yeah.
just a couple of scenarios, okay, just trying to think, about sometime. One of them would be, says a mandated, state, program, educational programs. So, I'll just use a crazy, 6'9", girl moves into the northern district. But Southern's got a really good volleyball team. She's a volleyball player. So she says, I want to go to Southern. But the only way I go to Southern is I want to take foods as my pathway. Because foods is not offered at Northern. Does that give that student the right to request that transfer?
She would, if her intent was to take foods, then I don't see how that could be denied.
I don't either. Obviously a loophole that,
Yeah.
I'm not advocating loophole.
Probably gonna have some, man.
But
I think it certainly could happen. I don't think it has
you're gonna get a lot of 6'9" girls that move into our county.
She might have to, provide transportation.
Yeah, right,
Sure.
right, yeah, that would have to be.
The other one that concerns me a little more is, I would sort of like to see the superintendent have some flexibility in, as I read it, it's very difficult, unless a student is a foster, homeless, or has, childcare problems, or has an identified IEP or something. But there are other situations that it might be in the best interest of the student. Student, is bullied all the time in a certain building. We just can't fix the problem, but the parents think the best way to fix the problem is to move the student to another school. I don't know how you would do that with this existing policy without giving the superintendent flexibility to say there could be extenuating circumstances that is in the best interest of the child.
Now, number 2 is for special placement to another school is recommended by a certified psychologist, psychiatrist, physician, other recognized community agencies or departments of pupil services.
The Department of Student Services recommended for that.
Right, because they
I
were.
guess if you went to that extent, yeah.
And
If that would be the recommendation by your.
certainly would behoove me to go to the superintendent, explain that situation and
And you could argue that it could be the health needs of the child too.
Sure.
Because that could include psychological health or.
right.
It is, I just think, that those things occur, as we all know. That sometimes it's the best interest of the child to be in another school, just is. And certainly it needs to be something that we have the flexibility to do.
There's a appeal procedure.
Yes, and there's also that. Yes, there is. That's correct.
I just to hop back to that examples, we might want to just say, examples may include students who, you know, are recommended for a particular program or service in their IEPs. I'm a little reluctant on the ADHD at this point, just because maybe when it was originally written, ADHD was a much, less used or less diagnosed, I guess I should say, than it is now.
I would be okay with taking the whole sentence out if you want to. Just leave it to physical and health needs of the child.
Yeah, I think that probably had to do with, maybe say schools at that time.
Yeah, which we're trying to, that's exactly where I was going with it, and, but I think Dr. Paul is correct that maybe we could just.
Remove that, examples, the whole.
Okay. Any other questions? Again, it's first read. We'll take it up for action in November. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Officer,
We forgot to say to Mr. Walsh about the CIP discussion for November. I told him. Did you tell, okay, let's turn that.
okay, our last bit of board business, we'll listen to our student member consent report is GCPS return to learn update from the superintendent. And Superintendent, I'll let you introduce Mr. Stevens.
Yes.
Right?
If you would like to come up, this is the presenter's, position.
Yeah.
And, what I'm gonna do, Mr. Stevens, is give just a brief overview of where we are. And then I'd really like, the board members to be able to, ask you any questions about our reopening plan and our plans moving forward, to, help the community, parents, and anybody else who may be watching or listening to, see the way we've collaborated with one another and answer any questions that the board members have for you. So I'll just have a brief update and then we'll turn it over to the board for their questions. So last month, I used a number of pictures to display our opening, and I thought we had a very positive opening since September 14th. And tonight, since we do have Mr. Stevens with us, after I provided brief update, as I said, we'll turn it over to you all for the health officer. Yesterday, October 12th, we brought back grades 2 and 3, 6, 9, and 12. I've already spoken to Mr. Miller, and he's going to give us an update, but he did go back. We're still on track to bring 4 and 5, 7 and 10 on October 26th, and then any remaining students, which would be 8 and 11, and anybody else that wanted to come back from virtual, on the November 9th. Now, we have started to get some questions from parents and other stakeholders about when we'll be moving to full days, when we will be moving to 4 days or even 5 days per week. And one thing I want to make sure that I mention is that when we started with the modified red, we started those special populations 4 days per week. And we didn't want to digress. We felt like they were our most at-risk students. So they are attending 4 days per week. We have had some people say that they don't feel that's equitable, but equitable doesn't necessarily mean the same thing for everybody. We understand that it is different, but since those are our most needy students, some of our youngest students, that were coming 4 days a week, we stayed with that, and then as we're transitioning, it is the hybrid model of 2 days per week. As you're well aware, the governor did announce that, schools can begin reopening. But we've done a lot of measuring and working with administrators, and we don't have enough room, and I'm sure, Mr. Stevens, you'll get questions about the 6 feet. We don't have enough room to completely stay 6 feet at this time, so we're looking at some of those numbers, and we'd love to get to 4 or 5 days, but we're not able to get there just yet. I firmly believe that we have accelerated about as quickly as we can. Teachers are navigating through an online and in-person platform while juggling schedules, some disinfecting, etc. And what I would like to do is to work with my cabinet, our teachers, our Tiger teams, our administrators, school-based personnel, and our union representatives to develop our next steps. Mr. Wazlowski mentioned tonight that the drivers have an issue because they pick up different students on Mondays and Tuesdays than they pick up on Thursdays and Fridays. And we're all trying to juggle that. And I'd like for our teachers and our administrators to get very good at that. I think we've brought back the kids in a very systematic way. We did accelerate it, but I think leaving it the way we have it right now to at least November 9th, and then at that meeting, the 10th, I believe, that evening we'll present our next steps for continued navigating to green. I do have a couple of updates from Mr. Wazlowski because we have had questions about the cleaning and sanitizing. He does have a meeting tomorrow with all of his head custodians. He is changing some of his sanitizing products because there were some teachers that didn't feel that they were quite strong enough. But of course, with stronger products, we have more regulations on how they're to be used. So he's going to go over that with all of the head custodians to share with teachers and administrators. You do have to wear gloves and masks, so it can't be a lot of skin contact. They have to wait for it to dry, all of those kinds of things. We are working with our hand sanitizing stations. There was also some concerns that that might not be strong enough, so we are working with what we have now. And when that's gone, we are moving to something a little bit stronger. So we are working with our teacher groups to try and meet everyone's needs. Again, I know Mr. Miller is going to talk about the student perspective, but I think overall, as I said last month, I think our reopening has been very positive for the most part. We've gotten very little public comment. We do get emails because people do want their kids to be in the buildings, and we do too. And I was saying something earlier that it has been such a lift for us at central office that have been working all summer to have our kids back. It is just so nice to go into buildings and see our kids and know that they're back where we want them to be. And that's with the certified teacher teaching. But right now they have a lot on their plate, so I would like to just kind of maintain the pace that we have now and then come back at the November meeting and present our next steps to the board for your consideration.
Yeah, I think we certainly concur with that statement that we want to stay on track of what we're doing and continue to do things as safely as we've been able to do them so far. And hopefully, I would ask you to make one other comment about the help desk, because there were some concerns about the help desk.
Right. We did extend the hours for the help desk Monday through Thursday. It's going to be from 8 until 8. And then Friday it will be till 6:30, so we've increased it by an hour and a half. But I spoke with Mr. Gank about that. We will answer the phone at any time throughout those hours, but since people didn't know it was open, they might not be calling in those later hours. But I think, Mr. Gank, you said that the overwhelming calls are during the day because that's during the synchronous learning, and that's when parents and kids are having the most difficulty accessing the content. In the evenings, it's the asynchronous where they can find a video or find the lesson, and they don't seem to be having as much trouble. But we are extending the hours of the help desk. If anyone is having trouble, please contact the help desk. It's one of our own employees that will answer the phone, and they can walk you through any issues that you're having. So thank you. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah,
so we are extending those hours.
Sure, that'd be a great help to those that perhaps work late and trying to do their lessons.
Absolutely, yes, parents are juggling just as much, and we do want to recognize that.
Okay, I'll open the floor now for questions for Stevens and anything that anyone may
Do you
have.
want to start with anything that you wanted to say, or are you just ready for the questions?
Well, I would just like to say that I think the the board and Garrett County Public Schools have done an outstanding job of trying to do this in as safe a way as possible. Certainly, you know, we have to look at the health of the community, the health of your students, and faculty, but we also have to be very concerned about the behavioral and emotional and psychological and educational effects that's on the children that you have in the public schools. So it's just so important, and it is it's a very challenging road that you're going down, and people have told me that they would not want to be in my shoes, and I can tell you that there are a lot of days that I don't want to be in your shoes because it is very, very, very challenging. And I think just to let you know, the health department has worked very closely with the administration in trying to provide input and to be able to do this as safely as possible. So.
Well, on that note, I want to thank you for joining us so freely at every one of our weekly meetings. You were just always available to us, as was Dr. Corder, and just the amount of time that we spent on just discussing something as simple as what is an acceptable face covering, and the work that I think that we need to mention Mrs. Aiken, because she's been such a tremendous liaison between our school system and the health department. You know, a lot of times people would look to me for answers, and I don't have a healthcare background, and so I felt very confident in passing the baton to either Mrs. Aiken or to you, Dr. Corder. So it was really good to have you in our corner.
It's been a very good collaboration. I'm sure, as you'll see when you start asking have your questions.
Well, I think one of the things that would be very helpful to those that are listening, like you really said this extremely well for us all to understand, is lead us through the 5 elements of low risk versus medium risk versus high risk that we as a school system need to consider.
Okay. Well, first of all, that information is available from the Centers for Disease Control, and you just Google that and look for opening schools safely, and it will give you some real metrics and guidance to help people walk through that. First thing you'll notice on that is that there are 2 indicators where they look at, how is the community doing? And these are primary indicators. And so the one is the case rate and the other is the positivity rate. Well, in those areas, Garrett County is in the lowest risk in the, as far as the positivity rate. Currently, we're at 0.8%, and that puts us in the lowest risk. But for the case rate per 100,000, we are actually in the moderate, which is right in the middle. That's the C range. We're not, and so that's kind of the community indicators. And I do want to let you know, and everyone that's listening, is that I think the community has done an extraordinarily good job of being healthy and trying to put in place all the proper safeguards to keep the rates as low as possible. If you look at some maps that of the country, and even you can see that, like, Garrett County is in the green, and all these areas around us are in the red. And so we've been extremely fortunate, but there could be some complacency with that. And just in the last few days, we've seen the numbers go up. There is a secondary indicator that is looking at your number from 2 weeks ago to the last week to see where we've gone up. Well, we have gone up 200%. Well, but those are very small numbers. So going from 3 to 6 is 200%. Those are really small numbers, but we are going up. Now to what I want to say about the 5 things that the school system can do, none of these things will make things perfectly safe. It is like rolling the dice. You can improve your odds by doing certain things. And so the 5 areas that school systems, and this is across the country, should be doing in order to increase the odds in your favor that you're not going to have outbreaks or epidemics within systems, including cleaning, and I know you all are doing a great job with that. Hand washing, and stressing that with prevention message for frequent hand washing. That's going well. Contact tracing, you haven't had to do much with that, but our staff at the health department, along with the school nurses and really the administration, when we begin to see cases, will have to do contact tracing, which is to look at, say there's a positive case in the classroom, try to find out who has been in close contact with that individual, so we can begin to isolate the individual who is positive and quarantine, which is also essentially isolating the people who came in contact, and that's in order to stop the spread. Face coverings is the 4th, and the 5th is distancing. And the way the Centers for Disease Control says distancing as great a distance as possible. Now, the number that's always thrown out there for contact tracing is 6 feet. And certainly, 15 feet is much better than 6 feet. It's unrealistic to think that you're going to have classrooms if people are 15 feet apart. But the goal is to keep, 6 feet or more apart. Now, if you're doing all 5 of those things, and I believe from what I know of the Garrett County school system, there's some classes and some schools that you'll be able to do all 5 of those things because the population or the student population in those schools are lower and they're not at capacity. They're 50 or 60% of capacity, and those schools can probably do all 5. There are some schools though that it's not going to be able to bring everybody back, and you would know these numbers better than me. May not even be able to bring half the people back and guarantee that 6-foot distancing. That doesn't mean that it is a single cutoff where you see now you're good, now you're bad. No, you're going from being in the safest range to being in the moderate, and that's yellow. I don't know if that's I can see it here,
Yeah.
and hopefully, I don't know if people who
The
are viewing.
right along the side here.
Yes, it's the second one down, and so where we really are is, we're in the best for the community indicators. We're in the best for one of those. We're in moderate for the other, and I would say in that moderate category, there are very few school or communities across the country that are in the lowest. Very, very few. And then when it comes to what can be done environmentally within the schools, it's in that yellow moderate category. So I made this point earlier, but I want to say it for the benefit of anybody who's listening or who was not part of that. You could have a bad situation, and if you are lucky, you might not have any cases. Or you could do everything perfect, and you could still, with the roll of the dice, not have some cases. And so, it's not your fault necessarily if you're doing everything right. It's not anybody, it is just that this virus it spreads so easily that there are no guarantees with this. And so, and then we also know that there's things outside of the control of the school system. You have all kinds of things, what parents are doing, family reunions, all those types of things. And that's one of the things I would like to indicate is that, again, you could have 100% of your students virtual. You still will probably have some of those students will become COVID positive. Or you could have 100% of your student body in the school in close contact with each other, and you may have a few that they don't get it. But you're really increasing, you're playing with the odds. It's a gamble. You're rolling the dice on this. And so, you want to do everything possible, in weighing, the benefits of the health and safety of the children, the staff, the community, and also, when I say that, the health and safety, it's also the behavioral and educational health and safety of your students.
Sure, thank you. Thank you. Other questions? Yes,
I have a few for you. I'm so glad you came tonight, sir. Good to be able to speak with you, the expert. So have you been in any of our schools since we started bringing in students methodically? Have you been able to take tours from schools?
I have not been in the schools, but I'm familiar with what is going on.
All right. I just had some concerns I wanted to bring up with you, maybe get your opinion on how things might be improved, how things are. So I've been going to high school the past 2 days, Southern Garrett High School. We dismiss all at once, bell rings, you leave your classroom, you have to walk single file across the arrows. We do for the most part. Certainly it is almost back to back, when we do follow single file. Do you see any concern with that, if you do, what would we do to improve that?
Well, certainly, having everybody go in one direction is the best. The most important thing is the distancing and the face coverings. The other that is really a challenge, especially with regard to safety, is ventilation. And certainly, you really don't want to be in tight spaces. But the only way to really solve that is, from my understanding, would be, to have where it's the times in between classes are staggered,
right,
so that not everybody's moving at the same time.
I think that would be a worthwhile thing to look into, maybe even by destination. If you're going to this hallway, you can be dismissed or something like that. That's all I have for him.
Rodney?
So, community metrics are really important, I think. And the cases per 100,000 or the positivity rate. Garrett County has done a great job, as you said. I think a lot of that's attributable to communicable disease staff at the Garrett County Health Department doing big contact tracing. When we do get a case, they seem to be able to isolate the people that are exposed. But as you know, as we get an increase in positivity rate and an increase in cases per 100,000, that becomes more and more difficult. I think what you pointed out was, there's a little complacency going on. People, we've been kind of out of the woods for a long time and not a lot of cases. And so people are letting their guard down. I see it all the time when I'm out, people waiting at restaurants without masks on. There's just, I really am concerned about what's going to happen. And the problem in Maryland, I think, is we don't know what metrics to use to say, all right, it's safe to pull more kids into the schools for face-to-face learning, or to try to restrict that again. And, Harvard's put out a good plan on that. I think West Virginia had adopted it and then eased back on it. So, the governor said, when you're everybody, all the cases per 100,000 are under 5 and the positivity rate's under 5, everything's good. It's safe to go back to school. But what do you think, as we monitor Garrett County, what should we be looking at? What should we be concerned about community spread? What are those, do you have any idea what the positivity percentage would be that would give us concerned. I know when absenteeism is at 20% or 25%, the health department with any epidemic really makes recommendations. But what's your thoughts on the community metrics?
Well, the one that I mentioned, that is on that chart, but is down toward the end, is one of the secondary metrics, which is an increase. And so, kind of a sudden spike. Well, we saw that, but it was with very, very, very low numbers. Keep in mind that, we can have if we have 3 or 4 in a day, that, or the numbers that we have in a week are less than what most counties in the state would have in a day. And so their numbers really can go up and down. So it takes us a little longer to really see if there's a trend. But beginning to see, an increase within the community, that's going to be, in my opinion, that's going to be one of the most important things we look at, which is a secondary metric. It's actually not one of those primaries. Certainly, the rate per 100,000, the way CDC does it, the way Maryland does it is different. Maryland does a 7-day rate. CDC does a 14-day rate. With Garrett County, we've begun looking at those 14-day rates. We still only report we want to stay consistent with the state of Maryland, so we're reporting on 7 days. But that 14-day really helps us, really take out kind of the peaks and the valleys with those numbers. And then again, the positivity rate. What's so important about that is that that means that you're testing the right amount of people, and so it's not so much that when that number goes up and you see an increase, what we really need to do is make sure that we're doing more community testing, and we need to make sure our doctors are doing more community testing. And so that's it. And then the double whammy, of course, is influenza, getting into influenza season. Hopefully, a lot of the mitigation that's going on that's related with COVID will assist with that. But the best thing that people can do is really get a flu shot, because the signs and symptoms are COVID-like illness, influenza-like illness. They look the same, and so it's harder to determine that, and that's what's going to be a real challenge for the school system. Is your nurses and your faculty and everybody trying to figure out, is this the flu? Is this COVID? Because while both of them are very dangerous, the response is different.
I want to point out where people can get flu shots this year.
Okay.
It's available right now.
Yeah. Well, the flu shots are available. What we really encourage people to do is to go to their primary care provider if they can. Walgreens, CVS, Greg's, they are all, the other pharmacies are all giving flu shots too. Health department is doing it by appointment, and that's in order to cut down on the possibility of people being infected with COVID while they're waiting in line to get a flu shot. So that's why it's by appointment. The same way as if you go to most doctors' offices now, you're waiting outside and they text you when it's time for you to come in, so they don't have anybody in the waiting room. We're doing the same thing. I would also just indicate again that we're working on a process to try to really help out to get as much COVID testing as possible and reduce the barriers for students who may show up with COVID-like illness symptoms. That we don't want an entire classroom or an entire family to have to be out for 14 days because they can't afford a COVID test. That they have to wait it out rather than finding out if they're positive. Because keep in mind that our let me see, I'm looking at where we are as far as our positivity rate right now is 0.8%. So most people that are getting a COVID test are not showing up with COVID. Now there is a lot of surveillance testing going on, but most people, when they do have signs and symptoms, it comes up positive for something else. And so those people need to get, once their signs and symptoms are gone, then they need to get back into school or in the workplace as quickly as possible, rather, than having to wait, the full 10 days, from the time that their, signs and symptoms occur.
What's our percentage of Garrett County that's taking the test?
You know what? I didn't bring a lot of things with me, but we have, is this today? So far, 5,752 different people in the county have been tested, for a total of 12,504 tests. So, a lot of our, nursing homes are being tested multiple times. And so, and those are the ones those are all with the, RT-PCR, PCR tests, which are, it's the gold standard. Those are all with those tests, although they're going to start reporting the others as well.
But that includes people that are coming from West Virginia or
No,
what, or this Garrett County residents?
these are all based on, when they take their test, where they say their residence is.
Okay.
Now, their data's only as good as whatever goes in is only, that determines on what comes out. And so if somebody is, says, well, I'm still on my parents' insurance, I'm 24 years old, so I'm gonna put down their address, even though I haven't lived in the county for a year, it's gonna show up that was a Garrett County test when they might have been in Ocean City. But vice versa, it could happen also where, and so those are the basic numbers.
And then the other confusing thing about vital stats and everything is deaths are attributed to the county of residence. So if you're in a nursing home in Allegheny County and you die and you still have a Garrett County address, that death is attributed to Garrett County.
Correct.
If you go to Morgantown and, well, that's a good question. If you're a Garrett County resident and you go out of state to a hospital and die, will that be attributed to Garrett County?
Yes.
Well, on COVID it will, not necessarily on everything.
It should go back through vital statistics. That's why it takes vital statistics, like almost 18 months to get back, because they do
You might not know
trace
about
those back. Right.
Other questions, anyone? I know it's been a long day for you, we don't want to keep you here all evening.
Yes.
No, I think I believe you're saying something about, like, if a person thinks they have the symptoms, they don't get tested right away, then they wait. So when are they actually, what's the quarantine time on that? The day they get the test, or, like, what takes a couple days to get the results from the test? What is that?
Okay, so this is one of those situations where from a quarantine and isolation standpoint, you're better off to be the ill person than to be the person who came in contact, because it's 10 days from the time that you first had your signs and symptoms, plus 24 hours without any signs and symptoms, without taking any fever reducing or any medications. There could be a dry cough or something like that, but the things like a loss of taste and smell, aches and pains, all those types of things, fever, they have to be gone for 24 hours in addition to 10 days. The person who comes in contact, though, with the individual, it's 14 days. And so everybody saw this play out with, what's happened nationally with the Rose Garden event, how long it's taken people. Some people who were in close contact, they were told 14 days, when the people who tested positive, they only had to go 10 days. So it does get very confusing.
Others? Yeah.
Having sat in on so many conversations with you and with Dr. Corder on the face mask issue, and like I said, just hours and hours went into us being able to identify what a face covering is, because originally, we had the whole gator conversation and bandana conversation, and both of those were deemed not acceptable for face covering. You know, we need to have two layers. But one thing that, people don't seem to understand is that the mask has to cover both the nose and the mouth.
That's correct.
How do you deal with that publicly?
Yeah, that's an educational, concern. You know, we could get into the whole enforcement side of things, which is it's very challenging.
Well, that's why I'm asking,
to
because
enforce.
our principals are, you know, that landed squarely in their laps,
Right.
both with their staff and with their students. And, I'm just wondering if you have any words of wisdom for our principals, because they're the ones who do have to enforce it.
Yeah, well, it is to cover the mouth and the nose. A lot of, I would tell most people, you have to do a lot of experimentation. With these particular glasses that I have, they can fog up very easily. It depends on where I place them. I have to place them further out rather than closer in. If I put them closer in where I would wear without a face mask, then they're gonna steam up. And so a lot of that is just, those types of things. And then there's a lot of misinformation that's out there also. You know, I'd say, you know, people that are you know, claiming, that they have a medical condition. Well, you know, that's not as many people have a medical condition that's going to, prevent them from wearing a face covering, and an accommodation can be made, which is, with the clear face shields. That can be an accommodation.
And, you know, some of our staff have asked that question. I think Mr. Miller talked about it one of the very first nights, is, you know, a lot of the high school kids really want to be back, and they're willing to do what they need to do to stay in school and to be back. So I think it is educating some of our younger children, and now that we do have guidelines, it is a little easier, you know, for our principals. There will always be somewhere that, you know, that the principal has to have to work with somebody.
Well, thank you, so much for coming by.
Yes.
Good.
For people that are watching, I know this seems to be a big question we keep hearing. When you look at the CDC, Center for Disease Control and Prevention, this reference to look up. On the one paragraph, it says masks are recommended as a simple barrier to prevent respiratory droplets, and it goes on. The question is, people say it says recommended, doesn't say required. And then before you answer, when you look at additional considerations for the use of masks among K through 12 students, and it has masks recommended, masks may be considered, or additional considerations. This is another thing that we hear a lot about in the community. Students are seated at least 6 feet apart in the classroom, which we're doing, but it says masks recommended or masks may be considered. The check mark is masks may be considered. So can you explain about that wording for the mask and about the 6 feet apart?
Well, first of all, there's the executive order that the governor has for the state of Maryland, which is, you know, if you're in a public space, then where the general public is in, then there needs to be the face covering. And so that's, you know, that's the law. People will say it's not the law, it's an executive order. Well, it really is the law because there's statute in Maryland that under a health emergency, then an executive order can be put in place, and as long as that executive order is in place, that executive order is the law until there's no longer state of emergency. So the big thing is with that. These recommendations, you know, for CDC, there's you have to look at the dates that those were put out, and they're going to say, you know, what is recommended, but because CDC is not making the rule, they're just saying this is our guidance, and our guidance is, you know, 6 feet, and again, there is nothing magical about 6 feet. 7 feet is better than 6 feet. 5 feet is not as good as 6 feet. 6 feet is somewhat of an arbitrary number, because that came out based on the fact that, early on, they believed that this was like flu, which was spread through droplets. Droplets don't stay in the air very long. They go 6 feet and they drop off. Aerosolized is much more likely to be spread all around. And so the face coverings, I have not heard anybody else really refer to it this way, but probably somebody has. But I don't call it PPE. It's not personal protective equipment. It's community protective equipment. You are protecting everybody else because you're keeping that aerosol from going out. And so everybody is helping each other out. You are protecting yourself a little bit, but if I'm the only one in the room that has the mask on, I'm going to be in trouble. If everybody has the mask on like they are not here, then we're all protecting each other. And so it's really important. And that's why we have, why they call it universal face masking rather than, well, if you want to, you can. If you don't want to, it's up to you. It's a free country. What we have to do, to protect our community is, have universal coverage. I hope I answered that.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to know how busy you are, and just thank you so much. As Karen said, that, our collaboration has been great. You've attended every weekly meeting that we were having there almost all summer long, and we appreciate your help so much tonight, and hope we've eased even more community, concerns and with the Q&A we were able to do. So really, really appreciate your time.
Yeah, we hope that you will come back to another board meeting, and if there's anything you've heard or it's important.
Do you think we should have a picture with Bob and board members?
That would be good.
6 feet apart.
Well, as long as there's a mask on.
The live stream, we're all in it.
Yeah.
Huh? Oh, yeah. Well, the photographer hopped up, so I guess we'll have one. Karen gave me the look.
Go way over there and,
Well, we usually go over there.
Let's do the president.
I was gonna say, we did.
Gotta sacrifice the president.
Where? Okay.
We can do
I'm
this.
here. How about the student member? Maybe?
All right.
Hey.
That's right with you.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
That's a big problem.
Okay.
Well, people, I'll take it off.
I already had my last.
We can spread out as much as we can.
You're gonna have to, you go right here, walk it further and further, like I'll get.
Listen, Sue, can you maybe just step over in front of us a little bit?
Okay.
Yeah, perfect. One, two, take one more here.
All right.
Awesome.
Thank
you.
Nothing in the henna.
I think it's a great idea.
Nothing in the brain.
Oh, man, what a
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's the seven.
Yeah.
That's you're not looking, are you?
Yeah, 6-0.
I don't know, you're looking.
Oh,
Yeah, that's just.
We've got 6-7.
Ribs up,
Yeah.
Okay, we've got our student member reports. Jared, tell us how things went the first 2 days.
All right, so this is the SNOB report, October 13th. So first I'll begin with my my written duties of informing you all on school events, things like that. Extracurricular activities, as you know, we're permitted to begin practicing and coming back recently, and from what I understand, they're coming back in a roaring success. My brother Jet is a freshman and he's a sophomore now, playing high school football. And I've seen firsthand the protective equipment that they're doing, plastic visors and all the gaskets of the helmet and a mask underneath the helmet. So, I don't envy running up and down the field in that setup, but it certainly is safe. And they're practicing without contact, from what I understand. So that is extracurriculars, I think, as far as athletics go, going back very well. Other extracurriculars, I've been leading the charge at Southern and other schools in the northern end to restore the student governments of our schools. GCASC, working with Mrs. Wazlowski, had set a goal of the 31st of this month to have 4 functioning student governments in place so that we can restore the GCASC countywide student government. Southern is on track to meet that. Northern is less on track, but I think if we, focus on it, we can get it done. As you guys know, we've received several accolades with our individual students, art awards and things like that. Our students have always been creative and innovative, and despite all of this, a bit of personal news. I had the lifetime privilege of serving as a member of the Autumn Glory Court with another Southern Garrett High School student, Miss Olivia Warren, and our Southern Garrett High School band, the ACC champions, won first place in our float contest with an immaculate float that I had the privilege of visiting. That was very nice. Continue the tradition of shouting out Mr. Germain and his staff that we've seen, and our IT departments. They have not had a break since we began, and we certainly thank them for it. So overall, this has been an overwhelmingly positive return to school. This is probably the happiest I've ever been giving a SMOP report. I'll speak a bit about personal experience. As I told you, I have been in high school the past 2 days in person. My body's been in the school. The first time since March. So 4 days a week for certain AP students. So I'll be back Thursday and Friday, but 2 days a week for the vast majority. So my experience has been more than adequate social distancing. My Spanish class is about 15 feet. As Mr. Stevens joked, that's about the reality when you have the quantity of students we have. That's not an excessively large classroom either. So mask wearing has been universal and non-protested as I thought it might be. Those that want to go back, they are willing to do what it takes. And the gator masks, the bandana masks, I did notice a significant number of them on the first day. Second day, not so much. I think they went away. They were wearing the proper cloth face masks that we agreed on. Let's see what else. More than adequate distancing and sanitation in the classrooms. I'm glad to see we're getting more stronger disinfectants. I've heard them described as fairy dust, kitchen cleaners. We want the strong stuff.
You're getting the
So, in terms of the actual curriculum of what we're teaching, it's not a significant. I'm not receiving more instruction than anyone else by going into school. I'm simply receiving it in a more direct way. And from my experience, I'm a very studious person, and even I found myself getting distracted when I was doing the at-home learning. For example, I have 3 younger brothers. They need attention, learning Schoology, and my own cell phone is a distraction. But I feel like I've gotten more in these 2 days than I have in perhaps 2 weeks of Google Meet instruction. So this is good, and I've heard that sentiment echoed by many others. But it hasn't decreased the value of what the at-home students are getting. We're still maintaining that live feed for those that wish to remain at home. So I'm glad Mr. Stevens was here, because my next recommendation was continue to improve and share our contingency plans, answering the critical responses to our what-ifs, increasing the public's confidence in the health department's ability to keep our students, well-educated and safe, keeping them, confident as I am that we can do that job. Suggestions for improvement. These are not criticism. These are just community suggestions that I happen to agree with very strongly. Schoology, I've been using it since pre-COVID. We used to do robotics trainings and things like that in the old Schoology platform. And I can tell you firsthand that it's been improving exponentially since more and more school systems have adopted it. And I'm sure as more and more school systems adopt it and they get increased funding, they can do a nicer product, of course. And I'm sure they're raising the scale to demand. But there have been several days, in the red stage where we've had, district-wide Schoology outages, but that's probably a national problem. And there are also many of my own teachers are sharing the frustrations of bugs, design flaws, things that just don't make sense, glitches. So there's really nothing we can do about how Schoology functions, obviously. But we can mitigate how we respond to it, I think. Perhaps a form of a help desk for teachers. How do I attach this file? Yep. Things like that. things that were too specific to come up in their training that they received over the summer. Issues we didn't foresee. I'll tell you another story about a software that we're using called Cami. Cami, if you're unfamiliar, is a PDF editing software. It's very useful. You can input text. This is an alternative to typing in your answers on a Google Doc, where you have to delete the lines. This is very, very popular. You just open it up in Cami, click turn in. You can do it K through 12, all kinds of worksheets. I've actually used it for some of my own personal papers as well. It's just so useful. I'm not sure. I've heard different things about whether or not we have a district-wide license to this product. But if we don't, COVID be darned. This is a great product. I think we should consider, investing in that. And I've heard it's a fairly small investment for the value that it can create. I spoke with Mr. Stevens about the hallways, as you heard. Hallways will be my biggest concern in transmission. It is not much less than the herd it has always been. You were the principal of Southern for many years. You're probably familiar with trying to walk in the other direction of the flow.
Where I would not go when the bell rang versus where I would go when the bell rang.
Right, correct. So I think he had a good suggestion of staggering the dismissals, perhaps, or by location or by time. And also just stricter enforcement of the single file. I found myself, even walking beside someone else, we got to work on that.
Yeah, much like elementary teachers, kindergarten teachers help with their students every day to go the right way. At all levels now, K through 12, everybody has to be a helper. To ensure that people are remembering, it's not appropriate to be 6 inches away from someone during this period of time.
And he also said everybody going in the same direction, so because that way you're not facing one another, so that.
We are doing that, correct?
Right, we have the arrows,
Right, we have arrows, but it's not, this is what you're saying is, because everyone's dismissed at the same time, there's just so many kids in the hall, it's impossible.
When they're all not there yet.
If we a small capacity and it's already, I'd say, concerning at best. So I'll conclude with thoughts on our general plan going forward. I think it's a good compromise, the safest compromise to reconsider what we're doing at the November 9th board meeting, probably no sooner. So I agree with that, and I thank you for your attention, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Questions for Jared?
Since Monday was your first day back, senior, I believe, 9th grade, unless they were already there for CT or a different reason. Did you see many 9th graders that were lost? Because I know we never had the 9th grade, 6th grade orientation where they got to go to school and see. Did you notice?
That's been a specific concern, but our teachers have always been great about, first few weeks of school, stand in the hallways. Hey, where are you going? Where do you need to go? It certainly has, they've been provided the same resources we were all provided with, minus the orientation. So I think they're finding their way.
How are the restrooms?
The restrooms,
Dismissal and everything, are they crowded?
well, the men's is limited to 4 students at a time.
Oh, okay.
The ladies have 5. And that's just, based on the facilities and how things are laid out. And that's pretty strictly enforced,
So somebody's there on
from my
everything.
experience.
Cafeteria working socially distanced?
Well, we don't assemble in the cafeteria for really any reason. In the mornings, if you're early to school, you stand in the gymnasium distance with staff monitoring you, and you receive your temperature check on the way in. Really no need for the cafeteria that I've seen.
So when do you get your lunch? When do you get your lunch?
The lunch you pick up on the way out. They'll dismiss 5 minutes early. You dismiss at 12:15 generally. 12:10 they say, if you are receiving a lunch, you're dismissed at this time. You pick up your lunch, and from what I understand, they take it home and they eat it at home.
Are we gonna start providing lunch in the schools, in the cafeterias?
Well, as we start extending the day, yes. Yes, remember, we've
We get past 12, 15.
right, we've talked about that for the high school kids. They wanted to build as much instructional time as possible into the 12:15 dismissal. The elementary students are receiving their meal at school.
Okay.
Other
Thank you
questions for Jared?
very much, that was.
He had a very good recommendation. I like the idea that we have the help desk for the parents and guardians.
to have it for the teachers, because we do actually, we have, the teachers, either contact Mr. Gang's department or also Mr. Schultz is still working on Schoology questions.
Yeah, he's
We're transitioning him as, teachers get better and better at Schoology, but we get calls every single day, right, Mr. Ganks, or even.
Yeah, we've always had that
Multiple
help desk
calls
for
from
teachers. They call our department directly. There's a separate email for a separate ticketing system so we can track staff tickets versus students and parents.
Yeah.
And, we've done that for all of our systems going forward. In regards to CAMI, we've requested, district quote, at the request of, I think, Mr. Wolf, a couple of days ago emailed me about it. So I haven't heard back yet, but we have asked what the cost would be.
I'm glad to hear that.
So, Ron.
Do you have any recommendation on what, any policy we can make that could help you guys out with the teachers or the help desk in general?
I think, using the phone number and the email is probably the best thing. The only thing that really trips us up, or that can trip us up, is when, you use a different route, because then the ticket doesn't actually create a ticket. It just becomes an email that can get overlooked. If you email myself or Jesse Coddington or any one of our techs directly, it's a lot easier to get overlooked than if you use the actual help desk, because then it creates a ticket, the whole department can see it, it doesn't go away until it's resolved. So that helps us out a lot.
The other good thing, and I'm sure this is still 12 years later, still appropriate in most all schools. There's almost in every school an expert, somebody who's really good at this, okay? And usually what I did, is even as principal, I went to the experts, Southern, who could do it, and said, hey, teach me how to do this. You know how to do this. So almost every school has one of those.
Yeah, I would say that is absolutely still, we don't have them identified as TRTs anymore.
No,
but we do
they're
have
still there.
experts, absolutely, yeah.
I'm gonna invite
I
teachers.
had a question, and Jared may have some information on this. We did end a grading period, right?
Midterm.
Okay, so there were reports that went out to parents and things like that. So how is it working? I mean, what are grades looking like? Where are we at with that? I think, we probably, that's probably gonna be our best check as far as how we are doing. So hopefully we'll pay a lot of attention to, where our student grades.
Well, and one of the, and I'll let Mrs. DeBoer, she works closely with the lead team, which is the instructional side. But one of the recommendations from the teachers union was to put out some PR that all grades count now. It's not just, as we were in March, when the state superintendent said no one will fail because of COVID. That's not in effect anymore. If you get a 0, it's a 0. If you get a 40%, it's a 40%. So we do, the instructional team keeps a close eye on that. Principals absolutely keep a close eye on that. I don't know if you wanted to add anything else, but.
Well, basically, I did want that, you said mostly what I wanted to say, in that everything matters now.
Right.
And it is just like it was prior to COVID, that the teacher is in control of what matters and what doesn't matter in his or her classroom, what gets graded, what doesn't get graded. The autonomy there has to lie with the teacher. But I did want to share with the group that Mr. Schultz is doing a great job of keeping all the rest of the instructional team updated on the logins with Schoology. And it has remained really steady with a total of, I don't have that, what's our total student count now? 3,700 kids, and, we're right around, 34, 35, 3,200 logins per day. Of course, that goes down on the weekends. Our highest login seems to be on Tuesdays. And then it's going down as we bring certain groups back into the building. So, the reason we brought pre-K to 2 in early was because we didn't want them to have as much screen time. So when they're coming in, they're not logging in as much. And that's reflected in the data. But this Schoology data is giving us information that we never had before. We always knew that we had about 15% of our kids who weren't engaged. And we can see that really clearly in the numbers now. You always had those high school kids that came in and put their heads on the desk and slept through the entire class. They're present, but they're not engaged, and that's, you know, they just look a little different in Schoology, but, we're able to track the same numbers. But the most important takeaway is exactly what you started with, Mrs. Baker, and that is grades count. They're,
Yeah, yeah, I think it's very important because, for us to keep up with it, because this is brand new. This is a brand new way of people getting information, of students getting information. And as we move forward, I think we really need to be checking, I mean, because AP students, like you said you're able to go four times.
Yes, ma'am.
4 days,
Yeah,
okay.
easily.
Okay, that's great, because I know that a lot is required of you taking those courses. So I think a good thing would be to monitor grades, even at this level, to make sure, before it, you know, goes too far and the student, is not understanding and.
That's also the great thing about school, is a parent can monitor that grade every day,
yeah,
every day, and see if that assignment's been done. So,
and the
Yeah.
student can too.
sure, yeah.
Hopefully they are.
Right. No,
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot are and some aren't.
I think you picked a good platform, Schoology. I know people that are in other school systems that said they wish that their school system had adopted that instead of going with some of the other ones.
It has not been without glitches, for sure, and, you know, Jared mentioned some of the national blackouts. Their capacity has increased, I don't know, exponentially from one year to the next, but they are really trying to keep up with it, and, I think we're in the best place possible, and I know I always do this, but, you know, had we not had Mr. Shope in the seat he's in, I don't know that we would be, well, I know we wouldn't be in the situation we're in now. He has done a phenomenal job of facilitating our entire system moving forward.
He's definitely expert there. All right, well, thank you again.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Okay, we'll have, any board member updates? Anybody have anything?
Well, if I could just also add, I don't want to leave Mr. Gank out back here too, because his IT department, you know, we have to realize that we went from 1920 to 2021, and we increased his workload and his department's workload exponentially, and they have not missed a beat the whole way. So I think, and everybody else too, you know, everybody on the instructional side has really done their part to get us to where we are. I was working on a paper earlier that was reflecting back where we were in March to where we are now, and we're a completely different school system.
I think, you know, you listen to, a lot of educational experts talk, when they're on TV talking about things. I think we will mark this year as the most dynamic change in the future of education ever.
No question.
Education will never, ever be the same. Because we now have a new way of delivering that information, that many people want to take advantage of.
And even, you know, in my state meetings, talking with colleagues who had been using Schoology for 3 years, but they weren't using it in this capacity. It wasn't mandatory, and, you know, they had maybe not as big of a learning curve as we had, but still a significant learning curve, even those systems that were already on platforms.
Yes,
I have one last question. I guess read it from Mr. Gang. I know we had some devices when we had ordered them, were on back order, or have we received them yet? Are we still waiting on some?
That back order's not due until January. We received a handful of devices that were purchased out of the grant, some devices that weren't on back order because they were higher end devices. Right now, the national back order is on lower end devices because everybody's grabbing the inexpensive Chromebook. We grant to buy some higher end devices because we needed new laptops for engineering classes and project lead-away classes anyways.
Mm-hmm.
This is an easy way to spend a grant that had a tight deadline and get some devices in schools. So we did get about 160 in for that, but the 2,000
200 devices. It's still not due in until January. But we're still one-to-one, across the board, with the exception of high school, which utilizes bring your own device.
So the ones are waiting on those devices, you said they were Chromebooks? Is that what they are?
Yep.
Are they for what, the younger pre-K K1s?
Yeah, no, those kids are on tablets.
Okay.
Touchscreen. These devices will go to the high schools and, grades 1 through 4.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I just wanted to mention, every year we pick a Teacher of the Year, and Kista Powell is our teacher this year. And I did notice that, even though we didn't have the gala, unfortunately, which is, a really good time, I've been, fortunate enough to attend a couple of those. You can go to YouTube and watch it, and, Dr. Salmon and Darla Strauss, who comes up with the teachers, you know, they bring the Teachers of the Year up here, for a retreat. And so I've got.
We also didn't get to have last spring.
Right, so we missed them. But if you're interested, in watching that or seeing some of the teachers, that were chosen, they do, each one speak. I heard Kista speak, about being a teacher. And it was rather interesting, and then it's on MPT, on YouTube, just put in Maryland Teacher of the Year. And, if you have some extra time.
I appreciate you mentioning that, Mrs. Seabold, and, while Kista is our Teacher of the Year, I think all of our teachers deserve some kind of an award for the way that they have stepped up to the plate,
Right.
and, I mean, just really knocked it out of the park. I can't say enough about, going into a pre-K classroom and watching a teacher teach those 10 or whatever little kids in her classroom, socially distanced, wearing their masks, and making it fun, and then leaving that school and then watching a teacher teach that afternoon online with just as much enthusiasm that she presented in the morning. There's just, nobody saw this coming.
Right.
And they have just
And I
stepped
think,
up to the plate.
right, and I think that would, we don't have the opportunity to do that, and I would love to see the kids, and be a part of seeing what a new classroom looks like, because it's changed a lot, I'm sure. Right.
I'll show you around Southern.
Oh, okay. I'll take you up on that.
Any other updates from board members or anything that you want to discuss before?
We have a group conference.
Right, virtual May starts tomorrow.
You're taking notes, right?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, right.
I have to take notes for everybody now, I think Dr.
Oh, it's up there, so.
Yeah, my assignment.
We are having a 12 o'clock luncheon meeting Friday. We're doing evaluation of our superintendent, so we're board meeting to do that at 12 o'clock. Anything else?
I just think I'd say piggyback what Mrs. Moore said. We need to say a big thank you to all of our employees. Everybody that works for the school system.
Sure.
Every employee has had to do things differently or a different fashion, learn new things, and they're very much appreciated and valued for all they do. Very much.
Thank you so much, everyone. At this point in time, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved by Charlotte, second.
Second.
Second by Atlanta Grace.
What?
And those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay.